The final chapter of the philosophical fragments, titled The Disciple at Second Hand, concerns the historical Jesus. How much does knowledge of the historical Jesus account for faith? If we could be translated back and become contemporaries of Jesus, would we have faith? Most of Jesus' contemporaries did not. In fact, they shouted, "Let him be crucified," and watched it being done. The Pharisees, who saw him healing on the Sabbath, didn't see the miracle but only the breaking of the Sabbath laws. Why is this? Because what was at issue was not visible. At issue was the fact that he, God, appeared in the form of a humble servant. Looking directly, all one sees is the humble servant, not the God. The same holds for those that immediately follow on the contemporaries. Kierkegaard supposes an ideal case. He writes, "Suppose there lived in the generation closest to the contemporary generation a person who combined a tyrant's power with a tyrant's passion for finding out the truth in this matter. He seizes all the contemporary witnesses, locks them up, interrogates them, confronts them with the contradictions of their accounts, their disagreements with each other, etc. What would be the result? On the one hand, he would have attained a certainty even greater than that of the contemporary who saw and heard, who did not have the advantage of multiple reports. On the other, he would be deceived. Why? Because even the direct contemporary would continually have to be reminded that he did not see or hear the God directly and immediately, but saw a human being in a lowly form who said of himself that he was the God. What he saw and heard was only the human being with the claim that he was the God. The tyrant would benefit by the reliability of this report, but this fact does not get him very far. Like the contemporary, he would continually have to be reminded that this fact was based upon a contradiction. The contradiction is that of the coming into existence of the God as a human being. If God exists, he is necessary and eternal, but the necessary and eternal cannot change, cannot come into existence. It always necessarily exists. By contrast, what comes into existence can both be and not be. It is contingent. Thus, the contradiction is that the necessary, the God, is the contingent. That is this contingent human being. Thus, the reliable historical report simply reports a contradictory claim. The God came into existence as a lowly human being. One can also put this by saying that the coming into existence of the God has to be matched by a coming into existence of the believer. He has to be reborn. What then is the advantage of contemporaneity, or of being one of those who immediately follow on the contemporaries? It is the jolt of the fact. In Kierkegaard's words, this generation has relatively the advantage of being closer to the jolt of that fact. This jolt and its vibrations serve to arouse awareness. One is aware of the contradiction. The Jewish law asserts that anyone who claims to be God must be put to death. But if Jesus is God, then one is committing an offense against God for the sake of God, as understood by the Jewish law. If, however, he is not God, then one is offending God in not following this law. Thus, as Kierkegaard continues, awareness is by no means partial to faith, as if faith proceeded as a simple consequence of awareness. The advantage is that one enters into a state in which the decision manifests itself ever more clearly. One has to choose. The claim here is that the contradiction remains a contradiction, that the choice remains the choice, no matter how many generations succeed. This means, Kierkegaard writes, every succeeding generation will evince the same relation of offense as did the first, because no one comes closer to that fact immediately. What then is the relation of the fact of the God's becoming man to being a contemporary of this fact? Kierkegaard notes that there are three possibilities. If that fact is regarded as a simple historical fact, then being contemporary counts for something, and it is an advantage to be contemporary. Having seen the historical fact with my own eyes, I can believe it. If that fact is an eternal fact, then every age is equally close to it, as everyone is equally close to the fact that a triangle has three sides, for example. But this is not a matter of faith, but of insight open to everyone. And thirdly, if that fact is an absolute fact, then it is a contradiction for time to be able to apportion the relations of people to it. Why not? Why isn't there a temporal relation to this fact? Because the fact does not change. It is continually the same, and in its continual relation to something else is continually status absolutus. In other words, something in time has a temporal relation to something else, a relation that changes with time, but the absolute does not. Yet, it is not an eternal fact, it is also historical, and as such the object of faith. The point is that we relate unchangeably to one and the same historical fact. The passage of time, the fact of whether we are contemporaries or not, does not affect our relation. We are in the paradoxical situation of having an ahistorical relation to a historical fact. At most, we can say is that a temporal relation to this fact is the occasion of our belief. As Kierkegaard puts this, just as the historical becomes the occasion for the contemporary to become a follower by receiving the condition, so the report of the contemporaries becomes the occasion for everyone coming later to become a follower by receiving the condition from the God himself. Since the condition comes from the God, everyone receives it firsthand. No one is a follower at second hand. The ultimate claim here is that this relation to the historical is unique to Christianity. The historical is the occasion for our relation to the eternal. He says Christianity is the only historical phenomenon that, despite the historical, has wanted to be the single individual's point of departure for his eternal consciousness, has wanted to interest him otherwise than merely historically, has wanted to base his happiness on a relation to something historical. But this, of course, implies that the historical must be approached non-historically, that is, independent of our historical relation to it.